Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us to hear about hiring trends. I'm delighted that we've got three experts joining us today, Rob, Sarah and John, all with very different perspectives on what has been happening in terms of the impact of the pandemic on hiring. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Katie Gallagher. I'm the Managing Director of Manchester Digital. We've done quite a few of these events now, so some of you will be familiar with how they work. So after I introduce you, we're going to have three speakers. Some of them have slides, so when they're speaking, you'll be able to see them and the slides. But if you want to just see the slides, you can expand them by double-clicking on the screen. Also, when our speakers are all finished, there will be a Q&A session. So if you pop any questions you have into the chat panel on the right-hand side, I will be busily collating those and asking them to our speakers at the end. Then when the Q&A is finished, we will be clicking the left-hand icon, networking, and that will give you the chance to do some one-to-one networking with peers. You get about 3 or 4 minutes, then your chat is ended and you get connected to another person. So you can basically meet as many people as you want to, depending on how long you want to stay on the system. So anyway, a couple of weeks ago, we actually did look at some hiring trends, but it's very much from the employer perspective. So we thought it would be really, really good to get the people who are at the absolute sharp end of hiring together and be able to give us both the employer's perspective and also they can give us an insight into what's happening with candidates. We are sort of very slowly beginning to move into recovery mode. And, you know, in January, we had some very clear ideas about where the hiring landscape was going. I know from my perspective, most of the calls I had with employers were panicking about Amazon moving here and various other things around wage inflation, what the ever-growing tech industry would do to some of the existing employers here. And I think some of that's changed. I also think some of that hasn't changed. And perhaps we've just seen an acceleration in trends that we're kind of coming down the pipe anyway. Anyway, before we get going, just a quick overview. So Ecom are going to talk to us first. They're going to be talking far more about the kind of new normal, the flexible workforce. Head resourcing are going to be talking about onboarding, integration, making employees feel part of a team, etc. And then Experis will be talking to us about what they've seen in the market and also sharing some global insights in terms of what's happening with other countries. So if I can, I would like to introduce Rob Sugden from Ecom. And he's going to talk to you about the new normal. If all the other speakers can mute ourselves. See you in a bit. Over to you, Rob.
Hi, thank you. Hi, yeah, I'm Rob. So I'm director for Ecom in the North. A little bit of background, I've been recruiting for about 16 years now, always in Manchester, always in the digital tech and data space. I'm kind of really passionate about using data and insights to drive decisions. And hopefully today I'm going to be able to share some of that with yourselves. So yeah, I've been asked to discuss how Corona's affected the makeup of the workforce and look at kind of the split between permanent and contract and how that's changing. And I thought before we look at how it's affecting things, it'd be worthwhile taking a little bit of a quick look back and look at how things were changing already. So, excuse me. So I guess traditionally, there's pretty much a traditional 80-20 split in favour of permanent resource over non-permanent resource. But in recent years, we've very much been moving away from that model in favour of more flexible solutions. So we're seeing a real increase in contracts, gig economy, freelance workers, statement of work in using consultancies to deliver work. And depending on the reports that you read, you know, kind of the percentage varies slightly, but everyone's in agreement that we're heading that way. And Deloitte were predicting that by 2025, this split will be something closer to 60-40. So 40% of the workforce not working in permanent roles. And in fact, we're already seeing that borne out in certain areas. 40% of New York workers freelanced last year, which is kind of a big stat to look at. And this change was really being driven by both sides as well. On one side, we've got organisations looking for a flexible way to be able to deliver projects and products without sort of an increase in headcount cost. And an organisation is really looking at, I guess, a total talent management approach. And that's very much where we see a focus on what work needs to be done and how best to do it, and not necessarily just at headcount. So we're seeing the role of the head of talent, for instance, changing to not just focus on how do we get permanent headcount into the business. It's more about how do we deliver the work that we need to. And then on the other hand, we've got increasing numbers of people looking to work for themselves. And this is largely driven by younger generations, the ones that are classed as millennials and Generation Z. And these younger generations have a real desire to work for themselves, control how they work, and when they work, and where they work. And yeah, we've seen this borne out in the numbers. The number of freelancers and self-employed people in the UK grew by 35% in the last decade. It's currently sat just over 5 million at the moment. And we're also seeing that the types of skill changing. There's been a real reduction in your lower skilled and business as usual people employed on contract, and an increase in more highly skilled people and strategic roles. Certainly, I remember when I started recruiting, organisations would have whole departments of kind of low skilled help desk people all working on contract. As recent as 2 or 3 years ago, we were placing teams of 10 to 20 project managers into the likes of HSBC and Credit Suisse. You just don't really see that happening anymore. Now it's very much about fulfilling those strategic needs. So examples of some of the kind of contract positions that we've filled this year already, a senior DevOps engineer to go into a business and help implement a new cloud platform and introduce new ways of working. A UX researcher going into a business to kick off the discovery phase for a new product, and an entire team of software engineers, a scrum team of software engineers going in to help deliver an important release. And while all those roles are very different, the one thing that ties them together is they were all strategic decisions to deliver a particular piece of work or help manage a change. And that's what was happening and why we were seeing those changes happening. And so that's what was happening. But then, sort of Corona's come along, the pandemic has hit, and it goes without saying that's significantly impacted hiring in the short term. The vast majority of organisations have stopped recruiting altogether. There's obviously been exceptions. We've got the industries like e-commerce, for instance, which haven't been anywhere near as badly affected as other industries, and some industries like healthcare, which have actually boomed in this and are hiring more than they ever would. But as a general rule, recruitment's been put on hold. But as lockdown's now starting to ease, we are expecting to see that move to that kind of more flexible, non-permanent workforce that was already underway to really accelerate. And again, there's a couple of different factors driving that. On one side, we've got people really questioning the whole kind of work-life balance. I think people have always said that they would, like to improve their work-life balance. They'd like to spend more time at home, more time with their family. But often people don't really do anything about it. And people have kind of been forced into this situation where they're actually seeing now what's possible. I, for one, have enjoyed, the extra time I've had at home and the time I've been able to spend more with my daughter, which has been really nice. And I think we'll find a lot of people aren't going to want to go back to the way they were working before. And if companies can't, and if their current employers can't offer, some sort of work from home, flexible hours, shared hours contracts, then they're going to seek alternative employment. And that alternative employment might not be traditional non-permanent recruitment. So again, it's going to drive this move towards this kind of non-permanent flexible workforce. And then on the other side, we've got the employers. I think it's fairly obvious that social distancing in some form or another is going to be around for a while now. The virus will have considerable long-term effects on our economy. The Boston Consulting Group predicts that we won't recover until a vaccine is found, and even then, not straight away. GDP is predicted to drop between 4 and 8%, so a real considerable strain on our economy. And to survive this, organisations are going to need to adapt and become more agile in their approach. These businesses, they're still going to need to have certain skills. The difference is they don't necessarily need those skills in the business all the time. So what we'll see is organisations taking an agile approach and bringing skills and specialist experience kind of as and when they need it. I also think we'll see a change away from kind of long-term contracts with people saying being on contract for kind of 12 months plus, and the average contract length may become kind of 6 months plus as people again are brought in to deliver a piece of work. But we'll also see people going back to companies on various occasions as they're brought back in, and companies building up rosters of the best kind of contractors or freelancers for different types of work that they can call on as and when they need it. This model is already used quite a lot in the kind of more creative industry, where a lot of agencies, for instance, will have a freelance roster that they can call on when they need. And I just think we'll see this being used more and more in different sectors and different industries. And again, we're already seeing this kind of reflected in the data, and obviously both permanent and contract recruitment have been hit really hard by the virus, but permanent recruitment's been hit twice as hard as contract. And I worked through the last recession, and contract bounced back last time round as well, with organisations not wanting to commit to perm headcount. And looking back at all the data, it was the same in previous recessions. So I see no reason it won't be the same again. And then I guess if you add to this the fact that the overall demand for talent has been reduced, what that means is that in the medium term, at the very least, contract rates are going down. In some cases, they've gone down by as low as 30%. Quite extreme, but we're seeing a real reduction in contract rates. It was being driven down anyway slightly by organisations taking blanket policy decisions around IR35. Now, I know we've kind of kicked that can down the road for another 12 months or so, but in general, contract rates are coming down while permanent salaries have been going up. So the difference isn't as huge as it once was. Sorry, excuse me. So I think, if you think about it, furlough is going to come to an end. And when that happens, a lot of companies are going to have to make some pretty difficult decisions. They are going to have to right size. They are going to have to look at the makeup of their skills within the business. And if you're in that situation, why wouldn't you consider, a more flexible workforce? Flexible workforce that, carries less risk, doesn't sit as headcount on the balance sheet, so and therefore allows you to manage your cost base and increase your shareholder value, and all of this while still giving you the agility to respond as and when you need it. And if this flexible resource isn't much more expensive, or in some cases the same cost as a permanent resource, then certainly I think that makes a lot of sense. So just in conclusion, we were already moving away from a traditional permanent employment model. While coronavirus has certainly put the brakes on things and stopped everything for now, as that eases up, we'll see that move towards that flexible style of working really accelerate. And those companies that kind of really really embrace this change will be the companies that thrive, because they'll have access to the best talent and they'll have access to it when they need it. So I believe we've got time for questions at the end. Be really keen to get your thoughts on that, and if anyone's had any specific experience of working in that way, and of course if anyone wants to discuss in more detail how it could affect their business, or just wants a little bit more information or data around this, I've got lots of kind of slides and data points that I can share, and be more than happy to have a chat offline. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Rob. I've certainly got a couple of questions from that. There's a lot of really interesting stuff that's been kind of chatted about in our employer forum a bit. So it would be good to chat more at the end. Also, obviously, you will get a chance to network with people at the end as well, so they can ask you questions then. Okay, so this is actually where it's really weird for our speakers who haven't used this system before, because you're just talking into a void. And we know that some of you are listening, but as you get no feedback, it is quite a strange sensation. So you kind of get used to it after a while, Rob. So our next speaker is, just checking my running order, is Sarah Doyle from Experis.
Hello.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Please feel free to introduce yourself and share some of your thoughts and insights. And I'm going to mute myself again. You have slides, don't you, Sarah?
I have slides, yeah. So do I just share my screen? Is it relatively easy? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, if you share it, and I'll just wait here while you,
okay,
just to check it works for you.
Okay, cool. Here we go.
Right, that's fine. So for anyone watching, if you want to, you just double click on that screen to enlarge it so you can see it in more detail. Over to you, Sarah.
All right, thanks, Katie. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Doyle. I'm the technology practice lead for Experis in Manchester. I've been with the business for about 12 years now, and I've done exclusively technology recruitment throughout that time, both contract and perm. At the moment, I manage a small team of specialist technical recruiters who look at really difficult roles to fill within the Northwest area, basically. So things like software engineering, DevOps, that kind of thing. We are a part of Manpower Group, and the Experis Northwest Hub alone manages 6,000 contractors and 1,000 annual perm placements. What that means is that although we aim to deliver a really sort of boutique and tailored service to our local clients, we do have really big size and scale that we can leverage as when we need to make sure we can continue to provide best-in-class service to our candidates and our clients. So that's just a little bit of an overview about us. I'm assuming that a lot of you are on the call because if you're not already hiring, you're hoping to do so in the near future, and you'd really like to understand a little bit about how the pandemic might have changed the market. So I'll take you through some trends. I will not drown you in data. I'll definitely try not to do that. But if you are interested in any of the research that Experis and Manpower Group have been doing during this time, do just let me know later and I'll happily send some stuff over to you. So if we look at local market trends, I think it's important to understand the context of what the industry was like pre-pandemic. And in the Northwest, it was very much the same as the whole of the UK. And that's unemployment was very low, demand was very high. And this led to some really significant talent shortages, particularly in the area of technology. And what we found is that overnight since the pandemic, this has pretty much flipped in a similar way to what Rob said, really. Data aggregated from our job board partners has found there's been a 40% decrease in hiring tech employers in the Northwest area over the last couple of months. And we've also seen a 21% increase in job seekers per role, unfortunately, as employers have had to let people go, whether that's contract or perm. What we have started to see, though, which is quite interesting, is that a couple of our clients who are really looking to take control of costs are considering insourcing all or some of their IT. Obviously, it gives them a little bit more control. Now, these are local employers, so this perhaps indicates that we are going to see some more technical roles in the future. What's also worth noting is with the increase in job seekers per role, this is pretty much across the full spectrum of IT role, but there does seem to be a higher concentration of people such as business analysts and project managers looking for work at the moment. These are more traditional IT roles, and it may indicate that the talent shortages we've seen prior to this in some of the more technical skill sets might continue. So if we take a look at the UK market and how that compares to the Northwest and how the IT sector compares with other sectors in the UK, You can see from the graph on the right that IT has been hit really, really hard. It's the black line at the top. Obviously, this is outside of retail, travel and hospitality that have undeniably been hit the hardest. What we found overall is that there's been an 80% reduction in permanent requirements and a 17% uplift in job seekers per role. Completely agree with Rob. We've seen perm be hit a lot harder than contract in this area, but we have seen a real spike in demand for some contractor requirements, particularly around network engineers, cybersecurity, the types of people that you'd expect to see, because obviously a business priority at the moment is to make sure their infrastructure fully supports remote working. One thing I will say, though, if you look at the graph, you can see that the drop has leveled out a little bit. We're due some more data, actually, that hopefully will tell a little bit more of a promising story. But IT is still very much a dominant industry in the UK, and our expectation is that this is going to continue. We've done a little work on global market trends, and overall we found even China are not far ahead enough just yet to be able to draw any significant conclusions, but we have seen a few things start to emerge. An organisation called DMXCO carried out a survey of businesses in Germany, Austria and Switzerland, and 70% of those businesses said that COVID has accelerated their digital transformation. McKinsey & Co have just published a report called Fast Forward China, which was really interesting. They said exactly the same thing. In China, there's been a huge push for digitization. And not only that, there's been some really significant shifts in consumer behavior that they expect will continue. So shifts like a move away from traditional retail to e-commerce, there's been an increase in demand for health tech products. Obviously, these shifts in consumer behavior all require technology. And so the expectation is that the demand for tech talent is going to continue. The third point on this slide is Manpower. Manpower did a global employment outlook survey at the start of the year, pre-pandemic. And every country globally estimated that they would grow their workforce. Now, obviously, we know that coronavirus is going to plunge us into recession, unfortunately, but the economy is going to bounce back at some point, and this growth will continue. So what does this actually mean for you? It means that if you're hiring at the moment, you have probably seen an increase in the number of job applications that you've put out. You have probably seen an increase in quality, as unfortunately some really great talent have found themselves unexpectedly on the market. But we think there's going to be a spike coming in demand for tech as organisations push to digitally transform. So it's not completely bleak. We think that there's some really good opportunities that you can do while the market is like this to help you to see this as an opportunity and capitalise on it. And I'll just take you through a couple of those now. So the first opportunity we see is that while there's more active candidates on the market, you could take the opportunity to build a talent pipeline, and that doesn't necessarily mean secure candidates for roles that you have right now. It's more about building an engaged and relevant talent community that you can leverage when you do actually have the need. And it is a really valuable step to do if you have the luxury and the manpower to be able to do so, because what it will mean is when you do go out to market, it's going to dramatically reduce your time to hire. Building a talent pipeline also enables employers to really understand their market. So if you think you're going to experience some challenges, you'll know before you go to market what those challenges are and how you might be able to mitigate that risk. It's also worth bearing in mind that even though there's more active candidates on the market than there would be, there's also a lot of passive candidates who, when we talk about passive candidates, they're candidates that are in gainful employment, aren't necessarily looking to make a move. Candidates like this are working from home. They're more able to have conversations with people at the moment. So again, it's a very unique time and one that people aren't likely to see again. Our second recommendation is that you will take this opportunity to optimize your employer brand. And in order to be able to do that, it's worth understanding what it is that candidates want and has that shifted during the course of the pandemic. Manpower Group conducted a global survey very recently and found that 35% of under 30s value work-life balance and learning new skills over money. And we think that the pandemic has probably shifted this as people started to really reap the benefits of that balance. I was talking to one of our job board partners the other day, and they said on their particular job board, they've seen a 26% increase in people looking for remote work. So it's important that you might have an amazing employer brand, you might have lovely offices, pay big bonuses, have had the means to increase salaries to meet market demand, but it's important to reflect on how important is this in the current market? How have motivations shifted? And the other thing to bear in mind is if you want to attract the very best talent in the market and as much of the market as possible when you have an opportunity, you still need to be able to attract passive candidates, i.e. those who are not looking for work at the moment. There's going to be even more of a reticence than what there was before for these candidates to make the move into a new position. They're going to want to know, how stable are you as a business? How agile and responsive and adaptable have you been as a business? How have you actually treated your employees? And are there good news stories out there? And what's actually your future strategy to ensure that you can survive the recession and that you will adapt along with the changing needs? Our third recommendation is that you continue to embrace the technology that we've all been forced to embrace during this time. We've really kept businesses afloat through the use of video conferencing technology, online collaboration channels, and we've definitely been able to secure some hires for our clients who have deemed some roles business critical. I've spoken to a few people who have said that they might go back to the way it was beforehand. And I would just really urge that you think about maybe doing a hybrid model. We've seen very long, convoluted, complex interview processes for more tech roles be transformed pretty much overnight into something that's really slick, really fast, really efficient, and has helped people to secure the perfect candidate. I'm not saying don't ever meet your candidates. What I am saying is if you have a multiple stage interview process, perhaps swap out some of those elements, face-to-face elements, with video. I think if you were to swap a first stage face-to-face interview for video, it demonstrates a huge amount of respect for that candidate's time and their obligations outside of your application process. We've started using video technology with our candidates to screen them, and we found it's really improved sort of CV to interview, interview to offer metrics, which is brilliant. And we've been using it as well to deepen relationships with clients, particularly new ones. If they've been willing to speak with us over video, it's helped us to build a rapport and develop a much deeper understanding of what it is that our clients are looking for. And again, that's good for you because you don't waste your time seeing people that aren't a good fit for you, basically. And our fourth recommendation is really that you look to future-proof your resourcing strategy. Take the things that you've learned during the pandemic and then really build on them. Organizations have really demonstrated during this time how beneficial an agile workforce can be. And hopefully thoughts are now starting to move towards the possibilities, the endless possibilities, now that we know a fully remote workforce can be possible. I know some of our clients are starting to really think differently about how they access talent, leverage that talent, and almost flexibly dip in and out of the tech workforce as and when they need to, thus sort of reducing costs, improving flexibility. So these are some of the things our clients are thinking about, and we've definitely had an increase in the same way that Rob said in people asking about statement of work or our employee consultant model, because they don't necessarily want to have a very permanent, rigid workforce anymore. It needs to be a mix of everything. Manpower Group have coined the phrase the 4Bs to solve the talent shortage, and that stands for build, buy, borrow, bridge. So this is a total talent management solution, and something that we really feel employers need to adopt if they're going to future-proof their organization. So the first one being build. So if you have talent in-house, could you potentially develop the skills of that workforce in order to be able to achieve your strategic goals? And where you can't do that, can you buy in the external resource in the form of permanent hires? I think sometimes that can take too long, or you can't get the quantity of people that you need. And that's when you go and look to borrow from the market and leverage external talent communities. And by that, I don't just mean contractors. I'm talking about freelance, statement of work, employee consultant, that kind of thing. And then the fourth one that a lot of people forget about is bridge. So at the rate at which technology is moving, some skills can become obsolete. And it's important for employers to think about what those skills might be and who might be at risk there, and really support your employee base in developing the skills they need to bridge themselves into a new role. And this is really great for your employer brand as well, because when you are enabling bridge, you are not necessarily enabling a transition into a new role within your organization, although obviously that would be great. It's more about caring for that individual and making sure that they remain fit for purpose for the industry as it moves, even if that's external to you. So in summary, yes, you may see more candidates in the market at the moment, and short term, that's probably going to continue, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when furlough ends. But we do think the talent shortages you've been experiencing are simply going to continue. And so while the market is like this and there is more resource in the market, we'd really recommend that you implement these 4 steps and build your talent pipeline, look at how your employer brand may have shifted during this time, embrace the technology that we're so blessed to have, and then future-proof your workforce through a more flexible model, essentially. And that's everything from me. I hope to speak to you all later. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. There was a lot more data in that presentation as well. I've taken a huge amount of notes for us to have our conversation at the end. So okay. Thank you very much. Our final speaker before we move to our Q&A is John Musgrave from Head Resourcing. And again, he has got a lot more insights and data to share with us. And he's also going to talk a bit about hiring remotely and onboarding and integration. So thank you very much, John, and over to you.
Thanks, Katie. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully that's worked. There we go. Yes, so firstly, thanks very much for the opportunity to talk. A bit of an intro. My name's John Musgrave, Regional Director, Head Resourcing. We're an agency that specialises in IT, digital business change, and I've been established for many years now. So I really wanted to pick up, Sarah and Rob, really enjoyed listening to them. I wanted to pick up on, you know, when we get to the point, some of our clients are already hiring, but into the future, how are things going to look? What might be different? And really, it's very much a thought-provoking little session around what do we need to be thinking about now if we are hiring, and even if we're not hiring and we're going to hire into the future. So ultimately, the 3 key areas, as Katie touched on, I'm going to talk about is recruitment, onboarding, and then how do we continue to integrate our employees if we've got a remote workforce or even a flexible workforce. So the things I would like to talk about are how are we going to hire over the coming period, what are the tech tools that we can use, candidate portals, video conferencing, things to consider. What does this mean for the employer breaking away from the normal face-to-face interviews? What allowances will we actually need to make in the interview process, and what new techniques might we have to adopt via video conferencing? Will technical and psychometric testing become more important? Employer branding, and this is something that Sarah's touched on, you know, how do we protect this moving forward? And how do we ensure a smooth journey for our candidates? And more importantly, you know, how do you engage effectively with your recruitment partners? So these are some of the areas I want to talk about from a recruitment perspective. And if we touch on the tech side of things initially, you know, at the minute, there are so many video conferencing tools out there, and some of our clients that are hiring are using things like Blue Jeans, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, and a number of others. And the thing is, will this adapt, and will there become a platform eventually that will be the main go-to platform? We don't know. But ultimately, it's about how easy are these tools to use, how easy are they for you to integrate, you know, and connect with your candidates whilst you're going through the interview process. There's also things like candidate portals. Now, these, you know, enable you to track your candidates and make sure that if you are hiring directly, that you're recruiting you're going through the right recruitment process, and you're able to offer the right feedback at the right times and get the candidates to the relevant hiring managers. I think the other thing that we've got to look at is testing. Now, do we think this might become a little bit more important over the future? My personal opinion on this is I think it will, for a number of reasons. Online technical tests are already in operation, and I think will become more prevalent. But I also think that we might actually see a little bit more psychometric testing going on, and I think this will be focused around and two key areas, and that is team fit. Will people, adapt and fit into the team that is currently in place? But I think more importantly, if we are going to have a flexible workforce and we're going to have a remote workforce, have they got the right personality to be able to work from home 7 days a week? And do they need any additional support, you know, to do that? So I personally believe that testing will become very prevalent. Employer branding, as I say, Sarah's touched on this, but I think it's key in the current marketplace that candidates understand the process, understand where we're up to, what you're doing as part of your process, and they have a clear defined recruitment process and good communication throughout. And that's for candidates that are successful or unsuccessful throughout the process. And I think, you know, the other point that I'd like to touch on this first slide is engaging effectively with your recruitment partners. And I think, you know, inherently we are a people-based business, and I think I'm more concerned that we will move too much down the technical route, i.e. emails and reliant on portals and not actually having relationship building conversations via video, you know, if that's what we need to do due to social distancing for a period of time. I'm just keen to make sure that companies still actually evolve the relationships with recruitment partners. In my eyes, this is key. This is how we built our business. This is where we gain our success, and how we actually create good ratios from, you know, CVs sent to people starting as an employee with your business. So I think really, as I say, it's very thought-provoking, this one, and I think these are the things that businesses should be thinking about now, if they are hiring and if they're not hiring. I think the next thing to consider, once we've gone through the recruitment process and we've selected an employee, how do we onboard them, and how different will it be doing it remotely? And have you considered how different that might be? So questions to ask: how are we going to do this? What is the current process for onboarding, and can it be adapted digitally? Will the new employee feel engaged and part of the team through the new onboarding process? And how do we ensure that they receive all of the tools and technical devices in a timely fashion? And do we change the way we engage with new employees on the run up to a start date? And do you need to add additional steps that might be particular to an individual team? So ultimately, to go through some of those particular points, I think it's sort of key to consider a number of areas. So the digital onboarding process, you know, every company will have an onboarding process as we speak today. A lot of those can be, you know, from snapshot sessions with teams to, you know, a full week in a classroom environment or boardroom, you know, being inducted into the business. There's a whole heap of different ways and means that companies do it. But I think it's critical, whichever way you do it currently, that you consider your options from a digital perspective. is a classroom environment. So you've got a new employee sat at his laptop or her laptop all day long, going through one long session. Is it going to be engaging? Is it going to be the right way to go? So I think these are things that we need to think about as well. It's important as part of the onboarding process that they have good interaction with the team, and this could include breakout sessions, one-to-one meetings with the team, and again, these are all thought-provoking ideas around what we might do differently. Is the IT function and HR training and development set up to deliver what they actually need in time for day one of their employment? So by that, will all the tech be delivered to them if they are working remotely? And will there be a schedule in place for HR training, inductions, and so on and so on? And I think really that's some of the key thought-provoking areas that we might want to consider around onboarding. Integration, I think. Let's take the process so far. We've recruited somebody, we've got them on board, and they have gone through a nice onboarding process. But what happens then, to a remote workforce? How do we make a candidate feel part of the team after the induction and onboarding process is finished? And do they feel integrated enough to be able to go through, to go to the correct person to ask questions? And how do they get to know the team from a personal level? And team building events, and obviously again getting to know the team are going to be critical in my eyes. So if we have a look at a couple of those, how do we make candidate feel part of the team after the induction and onboarding period? Well, I think this is something that a number of businesses are doing in very different ways, and some companies are having breakout sessions, some companies are doing online team building days with interactive gaming and things like that. And you've got a whole host of different options around that particular thing. Some people are doing quizzes, some people are doing welcome drinks or team drinks on a monthly basis online. So there's all different options to really, make somebody feel welcome into the business. Do they feel integrated enough to be able to go to the correct person, if you like, and ask, what do they do? Let's put ourselves in the shoes of, when we start a new role, a new job, there is an element of anxiety and nerves around starting that particular role, and having a team around you and befriending some of those teams or members of those teams very quickly enables you to ask a bunch of questions. How are we going to get this across in a digital environment? How are we going to look at buddy systems? Are we going to have proper intros on a one-to-one basis? So how are you going to integrate people to be effective in the business? And I've touched on team building events and and getting to know the teams. This can be done online. It can be done in a whole host of different ways, be it developed in-house, or there are a number of businesses externally as well that you can utilize. So really, in a nutshell, that was just a couple of questions there that are thought-provoking. We've asked some of these questions of our clients. We've consulted with some of our clients around how best to develop a digital approach around onboarding and integration. And I'm more than happy, to answer any questions or have any conversations with anybody that might want to touch in a bit more detail around some of those particular points. So yeah, in a nutshell, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, John. If Rob and Sarah can unmute themselves, please. We will move on to the Q&A. Could you just take your, oh, you've done it, thank you. Welcome back, everybody. So there's a lot of really fascinating stuff and really good insights from all three of you. So thank you so much for sharing those. So I've picked up a few questions along the way. And there was one that I wanted to ask that Nigel has kind of given me a second part to that. So I mean, given that we've had a skills shortage for so long, and even like, you know, our bigger tech companies have all been fairly determined that they wanted to keep campuses, they wanted people on site, etc., etc. Now that we've been forced into this remote working scenario, will location become less important to those businesses? Sarah, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point you've made, and I read Nigel's comment on the side as well. I think location will still be important. I think that, well, we were talking before we went live, weren't we, about the amount of collaboration in Manchester. We expect that property prices are probably going to be driven down in the city centre, which is very positive. Perhaps not for the people that own the building, but we do expect that it's still going to be important to be in Manchester and be in that community and that spirit of collaboration, I would say. Is it going to be as important that roles are permanently and 5 days a week based in Manchester? In my opinion, it really shouldn't be. And I think that it would be a mistake to really focus on that. And, you know, that is something that organisations are probably going to have to be quite bold and brave about. I made a point about diversity in my slide deck, and I think that if you have vacancies that are open to remote working, you are making vacancies more appealing to people who have obligations outside of travelling into the city centre every day. You are making vacancies more appealing to people who may have disabilities and might not want to travel every day, and you're opening up your vacancies to people who are from different socioeconomic backgrounds as well, and people who might not have the means to travel in every day. So, very long-winded answer.
Okay. So, Rob and John, have either of you seen a change in terms of your clients asking you to either broaden your location search or remove the location requirements altogether?
I think from my point of view, we've been in a position with a number of clients that have already adopted this through skills shortages and would look at full remote working in the first place. So it's really interesting, and for me to see how the pandemic will drive this forward. They've done it purely off the back of, we want the best talent, and it doesn't really matter whereabouts they are based. And that, you know, has gone as far as Texas in some cases, you know, for a UK-based organisation. So for me, I think there will be two sides to the story, which Sarah's touched on as well, i.e. there will always be a shortage, I think, in technology in certain areas. So therefore, the remote option will be good. But then you've got your collaboration side, which means that actually it could be better that people are based in Manchester or a location. You know.
Okay, Rob?
Yeah, I don't have both those points. I think we'll see a big difference probably in Manchester compared to London, for instance. In London, there'll be less of a requirement for people to be in the city because a lot of people travel into London for work anyway. So you'll find companies not looking for people to travel. But in Manchester, we have a larger population who live in the city centre. A lot of people for the tech companies live within walking distance of their office. And what we've seen, you know, over kind of the last 5 or 10 years is companies moving into the city centre to be close to that talent and get access to the best people. And I won't see that changing. But yeah, agree. There'll be less need for people to be permanently based in the office. You'll see organisations maybe taking 75% office capacity space and rotating when people are in, as they just won't need everyone in all the time.
Okay. Also, and I've only been told this anecdotally, so I have nothing to back it up. But I've been hearing that there's from a couple of property agents that people are actually, or companies are actually looking at taking edge of city centre and edge of town properties in the short term that obviously have car parking attached to them and cheaper space while they have to accommodate more people in social distancing, blah, blah, blah. So I think there could be some interesting out of city centre short term trends as well.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully I think that captures Nigel's question. Nigel, if we've missed anything, please feel free to re-ask us. So John Grant has given me an essay to ask you. So maybe if we have a look at it. So it's a great question though, John. So thank you very much. So post-COVID, John anticipates a focus on business resilience, meaning a race to automation, automation meaning more data, kind of stuff around machine learning models and AI. So unlike previous periods of technological change, the rapid adoption we are likely to see will lead to structural technological unemployment. Would you agree? So this is, sorry, about innovation leading to
I'm not sure I do 100% agree with that. I think we've been through lots of transformations before, through the history of the human race, and it's just mean that those skills have moved elsewhere. Yes, automation will take certain people's roles away, but it will free up those people to work in other areas. And there's so many areas that can't be automated and skills that can't be automated. And still, I've got a load of stats here that I haven't got time to read through, but I don't think it will create unemployment, but the unemployment will just change and shift to different sectors.
Yeah,
okay.
I agree with Rob there.
John, anything to add on that?
No, I agree with Rob. I think it will just shift to other sectors.
What do we think about those job roles? I think it was Sarah who said you've seen an increase in job roles such as business analysts, project managers, possibly the slightly less technical end of the industry looking for jobs. What kind of advice would you give to those people in those roles in terms of, should they be starting to think about reskilling? Do they need to start looking at, moving into more of a T-shape and picking up more technical skills?
I would definitely recommend that people start to look at that. These skills are by no means in any way, shape or form redundant. It's just more that we are seeing an increase in people wanting some technical ability as well. So I would recommend, if you are in gainful employment, you should be putting pressure on your employer to ask how are they going to future-proof their skills to make sure they don't end up in a position where what's required of them isn't really fit for purpose in the business anymore.
Okay, so we have got a couple of people on who are probably concerned is probably the wrong word, but somebody, as companies kind of reshape and resize their teams post-pandemic, if you're in a permanent role, should you panic? I think the answer is never panic, always plan. And what advice can you guys give Michael on how to prepare for that eventuality?
I think, first of all, don't panic. And then beyond that, it's very difficult to say without knowing exactly what Michael or the other people do for a living. It's difficult to say whether they're going to be one of the people at risk. I think, you've just got to look at the business that you're in, and not all businesses will have to put people at risk. Not all businesses will have to make redundancies. But there is a fact that some businesses will need to. So you've got to look at the industry that you're in, the role that you're in that business, and I guess ultimately how important you are to that business. If you think that potentially you're going to be at risk, then yes, you've got to kind of keep your options open and start to look what else is out there.
And if you've been in the same job for sort of 10 years, John, and going back into employment is scary, how do you start? Where do you start?
Well, I think the key thing is to have a clear understanding of what you want from a career point of view. What's next for you in your career? If you feel that it's not challenging enough, or you're doing the same job, do you want to do the same job? And if so, what opportunity will that lend, itself to in the local area? So research is key, and understanding yourself as an individual and what you want from a career is absolutely key as well.
Okay. Sarah, we've also had another question, which is about internships. So this has come from an international postgrad student in the University of Manchester. So. Okay. But more broadly, are you seeing I mean, we've kind of heard that companies are cutting back on grads and various things, but I'd be interested on your perspective on companies and their hiring of early talent.
So I think we're definitely seeing a shift towards people being interested in hiring people with the aptitude, but not necessarily the skills just yet. And I think that can definitely be seen through the growth of organisations like North Coders, Tech Returners, that kind of thing. Around internships in particular, I don't have the answer, unfortunately. But I definitely think there is more of an opportunity for people to move into this as a vocation without necessarily have taken a traditional route.
Okay. Anybody else have any insights into the early talent pipeline? Do you think more grads are going to have to go straight into being self-employed and contracting?
I think that they will want to. They will want to do that. You know, the kind of millennials and Generation Z, they make up 59% of the workforce this year, and it's something that they all want to do. So it's not whether they will need to do it. I think we see the vast majority of people wanting to work that way in some form or another.
Okay, so a bit more, another question on advice for standing out in the job market. You've kind of got to get the work experience in. How do you get work experience when we're working remotely?
It's a very good point. I think a lot of people, particularly if you're looking at things around software development, there's platforms like GitHub where you can showcase your work. And I think from what we've seen of employers in the market, it's the people that are really passionate and spend a lot of their spare time developing and honing their craft that makes them appealing to employers. And we are seeing an increase in people wanting to see that from people rather than people that are doing these things for a job, basically.
John, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it sort of mirrors what Sarah's saying. It's enthusiasm, and typically people used to gain experience not necessarily through employment, but through tech meetups and things like that, and making friends in other businesses that were probably more experienced than they were. And that's continuing, but it's continuing from a digital perspective. So those people that want to increase the skills, enhance the skills, and actually just increase their overall network and knowledge of businesses in the local area is to get involved in those tech meetups as often as they possibly can.
Okay. Rob, can we dig a little bit into the contracting versus permanent stuff that you were talking about in the beginning? So you were talking about the fact that IR35 had meant that contractor rates had come down. We know that it was an employer, or wage inflation has been a massive problem for employers for a couple of years, especially those at the SME end of the market. So we think there'll be an increase in contracting roles, but the overall rates will come down and people will hire less permanent roles, but with better salaries. That was kind of where we were going. So how do you think that is going to look in kind of 6 months, 12 months? Do you think it will spring back to how it was with contractors out front being paid really big day rates, or do you think that there's going to be more parity?
We're certainly moving towards more parity. I mean, it's never going to be exactly the same, but all the data suggests that it's that, and anecdotal as well, that the difference between contracting and permanent isn't as huge as it once was, from an economic point of view, and that's driven by both contractor rates sort of coming down a little bit, but permanent salaries going up as well. Certainly if you look at things like software engineering, for instance. Yes, it's not as large a difference as it once was.
Okay, Sarah?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think there's more parity. I think that what we might start to see in perm, we have seen an increase, but I think we're increasingly speaking to candidates who say that they would take a cut or they would make a level move for something that had more remote work or flexibility. So I definitely think that the wages might stop going up a little bit to make way for just different ways of working. We used to, I used to do a lot of recruitment for the government, a lot of digital transformation things. And as you know about the government, obviously it's taxpayers' money and they can't pay quite as much as the private sector. But we were finding, obviously the pension was really attractive, but we were finding people would take a really, really big pay cut because of the social value of the things that they were looking to do, because of the size and scale of the projects that they would be working on. So I think that we won't necessarily see salaries be driven up if employers can get that branding and positioning right. And if you can ensure that the message you're taking to market, whether it's through your network, through your talent acquisition team, through your recruitment partners, ensure that that message is very loud and very consistent and speaks to what the market wants to hear.
Okay, thank you. So just another quick question from me before we move on to networking. I'll start with you, John. How, if employers, if we move to this hybrid model or entire model of remote working, how will employers change benefits packages to reward employees? If everyone offers flexible working, it's not going to be quite the prize it was. What do you think? What other things do you think are going to come to the fore?
Do you know what? It's a really interesting one, that, Katie, because I think there's things that people are actually missing here, in the fact that, you've touched on it there, that remote working is a benefit to most people. Having the opportunity to work at home is a benefit, but it's not to everybody. It's not everybody's cup of tea. And I think, from an employer's perspective, some of the things that you might need to consider is, if you are going to have a remote workforce and you are going to ask them to work from home, whose responsibility is it to make sure they've got all the right equipment at home to work effectively and productively, and things like that. So there's a number of things to look at in this particular area. So it's not just about what extra benefits can we add, or what can it look like. The benefit itself is, if we're going to adapt how we do work, throw in another bonus scheme that somebody isn't necessarily going to, as Sarah's touched on, is going to float that particular boat. So I think we need to think more about, if we are going to ask our employees to work from home, what does that mean to us as an employer? I.e., what tools will we need to offer them? What equipment will we need to offer them? And more importantly, benefits along the lines of health and well-being, mental well-being will probably become a lot more prevalent, and making sure that we're checking in with our teams and colleagues and teammates along the way. So I think benefits will adapt slightly, more to do with mental well-being and comfort of working remotely.
Okay, Rob, anything to add to that?
No, I think just the point around how people are set up and what facilities they have at home. Will we see more companies paying for broadband and providing mobiles and laptops as a matter of course, and as John said, the whole health and well-being piece, mental health in the workplace is huge at the moment, and I think it's only going to become more and more prevalent.
Okay, Sarah, so final comment from you?
Yeah, no, just agree with everything everybody said. People care about quality of life nowadays, so any benefits that impact that positively, so gym, family days out, mental health, these are the types of services that I think people are going to want to access in the future.
Okay, so my biggest dread is people ending up with their houses full of really ugly office furniture that's been imposed on them by employers. Nobody wants those ugly IKEA office chairs in their houses.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much, the three of you. We've covered a lot, and you shared a huge amount of insight. So, and also to have that much insight at this stage, when obviously you're all adapting to remote working and different things yourselves, is quite a feat. So thank you so much. So if everybody would like to look to the left-hand side of their screen, you can click the networking, and you will be able to carry on the conversations with your peers. And all that remains is for me to say thank you very much to all of you for joining us today. And thank you so much to our speakers, and hopefully we will see you back here speaking into a vacuum at you at some point in the next few weeks. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Katie.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.